Welcome back to another edition of the Prognosticus, the Chicago Catholic League's premier football preview show, right here on the Varsity Voices Media Network. I'm Joe Frevaletti, and here with me is my co-host, Dan Frevaletti. This week, the Catholic League schedule is stacked with some heavyweight battles and season-defining moments. We've got Brother Rice and St. Rita in a clash of rivals, Mount Carmel taking on Nazareth in a showdown of champions, IC Catholic squaring off with St. Ignatius and the Loyola Academy on the road at St. Francis. Plus, more games across the conference that are sure to shape the playoff picture. We'll break down each matchup, spotlight the key players, talk about the momentum, and of course, give you our predictions on who comes out on top. Buckle in. It's another big week of Chicago Catholic League football, and we're about to dive right in. Dan, week 3 is here already. Can you believe
we
it?
say it every year, whether coaching or doing the podcast, it flies by. If you are looking to buy or sell a home, contact RE/MAX Realtor and Circle of Legends recipient Christopher Cobb. Let Chris's extensive negotiating experience work to guide you on all of your real estate buying and selling needs. Contact Christopher now to discuss the right strategy for your personalized real estate buying and selling plan. His number is 630-420-0070, or you can visit his website at christophercobb.com.
And not only is week 3 the first games that are within the Chicago Catholic League playing each other, but you and I were debating whether they are inter-division games or intra-division games. And you and I cannot come to a conclusion on this, right?
No, and Google isn't much better because I tried.
Google's not much better, right?
So,
yes.
So we went with inter on the artwork, and but inter is defined as something between two different entities, right? So Illinois plays Oklahoma. That's
right.
Inter between two divisions. However, so if Illinois were to play Northwestern, it is intra-division, right? That makes sense.
But that is more intra, like conference,
right?
Or league,
yes, intra,
not division, right?
And it's so if you think of it, I think everyone calls it intramurals, but I think it's actually intramurals.
Right, I do too.
Yeah. So that's a good way to kind of get your head around it. So that's played within, we played intramural basketball at Bennett back in the day. Great league.
Yes.
Great league. God, was that fun.
It was fun.
But that's all, it was all Bennett kids, and we were just playing within the school. So, but this is a conference and then divisions within the conference.
Right.
So is it all one thing, meaning it would be intra, right? Like intramural. It's hard to say when you slow down. Or is it inter because it is two different divisions within that one mega conference?
You know what? I think you and I have debated this long enough, Dan. Not debated. We've gone back and forth on is it intra? Neither one of us know. So we have a lot of smart listeners out there.
Yeah.
I think
people affiliated with schools. There's got to be an English teacher,
English
whiz. That's a listener. Someone who was an English whiz. That's a parent now. Yeah. Someone's got to help us out.
Someone's got to help us out. So we don't get all that many comments, and we would love for people to weigh in and let us know what the correct way of categorizing this is. So this week we've got games within the Chicago Catholic League and then broken down by divisions, and we've got one division schools or teams playing other division schools. What is that called? Inter or intra? And then the other one would be when the schools play each other or teams play each other that are within the same division. What is that called? I'm going to leave it at that, Dan.
Okay.
Is that good enough?
Good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wish
All
Too
right,
bad we
good.
can't. We're not a radio show. We can't give away $1,000
A,
to the first
a
correct
prize.
caller.
We can, we can give away though. We can give away a mention, a
There we
podcast
go.
that here is somebody who weighed in. We will say your name loud and proud on a future podcast.
Yeah, you got credentials though. It can't be like
True. Yeah.
our brother Tony weighing in because
No,
because that's
because it's not going to be right.
Right.
It's not going to be close to right.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't want any siblings, any nieces, nephews, because I know none of them are experts. So I would love to hear from a listener, maybe English teacher, grammar expert, I don't know, word expert. What are word experts called? You have any idea?
Maybe, but I'm leaving it.
All right, don't say it. It's just going to open up another question. All right, let's talk about the games coming up this week, Dan.
All right,
and some really good ones. And we've had our prognosticus weigh in on these. I went back and forth a bunch of times with my prognosticus today because I had a little trouble with some of the games. I don't know. Did you? And did you need a lot of input?
Yeah, we're 50-50. Who does what, and I let the my prognosticus know I'm struggling with certain games. So if there's ones I know I don't want his opinion.
Yeah.
So other than that, yeah, he can weigh in and with clicks and screeches.
All right, good enough. So let's go into the first game here, Dan, and this is Brother Rice versus St. Rita. So these are two longtime rivals. I think this promises to be one of the best games of the week, Brother Rice and Rita. So Brother Rice, they come into this undefeated. They're 2-0, and they've looked every bit the part, I think, of an early contender. You know they have the talent. They opened up with a 43-19 win over Valparaiso. They followed it up by cutting out Marist, 35-0, which to me was a real statement if you're looking to make a statement. So then on the other side, you've got Rita sitting at 1-1. They had a good win over Marist in week 1, but then they ran into Mount Carmel and lost 35-14. I think when I look at this game, I'm thinking about the star power, and both teams have star power.
Yeah.
They do. You've got C.J. Gray from Brother Rice. You've got Armbruster from St. Rita. One of the things I'm not sure about is Walter Jones. He got injured in last week's game. Not sure if he's going to be there. If he's not there, that's a big loss for them. So my question, I've got a simple question for this, Dan. Do you think Brother Rice's hot start kind of carries them through to another statement victory over St. Rita? Do you think this is the year Brother Rice takes that big step and puts themselves at the top? I do, and I'm picking Brother Rice in this game. ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a devastating illness that weakens the muscles we use to move, swallow, and breathe. Over time, it becomes fatal. On average, people live just 2 to 5 years after diagnosis. There's no cure yet, but thanks to research and clinical trials at the Les Turner ALS Center at Northwestern Medicine, we're getting closer every day. This fight is personal for me and Dan. Our brother-in-law passed away from ALS a couple of years ago. That's why I want to invite you to join the ALS Walk for Life on Saturday, September 20th at Soldier Field, hosted by Chicago's Les Turner ALS Foundation. Funds raised support their mission to provide comprehensive care for people living with ALS, their families, and to advance life-changing research. Come be part of the movement. There'll be food trucks, live entertainment, and fun for the whole family. Together, we can honor loved ones, support those battling ALS today, and bring hope for a cure tomorrow. Learn more or register now at alswalkforlife.org.
Well, to me, the highlighted players, that are going to get the spotlight from me is Brother Rice's D-line studs of King Liggins, Braden Parks, and Cam McGee. For St. Rita to hang with them, Joe, they're going to have to get the ball out quick and keep that Rice defense on their heels. St. Rita is just in the midst of a brutal opening schedule. And
Right.
Stephen Armbruster and Walter Jones, if healthy, Owen Lynch and company are going to have to crank it up. Once again, that has to be hard to do over and over and over again to
Yeah.
defeat what looks like one of the state's best teams. I think there's something defensively brewing at Brother Rice that's pretty monumental, and
Okay.
that's why I'm going to go with Brother Rice.
Okay. All right. We're both going with Brother Rice, and that's going to be a great game to watch. I can't wait to see
Yeah.
it. So, we're going to bring you this information too on Friday nights to our listeners. I'll be in the studio, Dan. I'll be monitoring the scores. You're going to be out at the Montini Marist game, right? Yeah, doing our next CCL sideline.
Yes.
So our listeners are going to get a real treat on Friday night. Not only
treat.
will they get the scores, they're good to get to see you out there at Montini covering the Montini Marist game.
Yeah. Can I make a request for that?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you see me, just don't mess with my selfie stick.
All right. Yeah, that's a good request because you're going to be holding it out in front of you, right? Everywhere you're going.
I go, yeah. It's got a light on it. Yeah, it's quite the thing. So I would want anyway, yeah. It's
all right.
Yeah, let's
you put that out there.
Right.
So I think it's there. Don't mess with your selfie stick.
Right.
Okay.
It can be a weapon and an attitude adjuster.
It could be. Right. Anybody gets a little too close, yes. But I'm sure one of the things you're going to do, Dan, is get a taste of the arancini at Montini.
On camera.
Good. Yeah. We'll show you that. All right. Very good. So the next game here is Mount Carmel and Nazareth. This game, I really had a hard time with this game. I mean, two programs, championship pedigrees, state title streaks on the line. You start with Mount Carmel. They're 2-0. Of course, they look like a powerhouse. They opened the season with a huge national win, really, over Archbishop Moeller in Ohio. And then they turn around, they dominate St. Rita, 35-14. And it's not just the results, Dan. I think when you look at their roster up and down, and I looked at a couple of people like recruiters who've been around a long time and said this might be the deepest team they've seen with Division I recruits in decades, as far as the number. Yeah. They said a lot of schools will have 3, 4, 5. They said, but Mount Carmel's got 8, 9, 10 guys who are D1 and top D1 programs. So I think that's just too much for Naz to deal with. I know this is at Nazareth, right? And I mean, I don't want to downplay the talent that Nazareth has on their side, especially with Trenton Walker and Jake Sistone, some of the players they've got up front, and they're going to come prepared. But I'm just not sure who can compete with Mount Carmel this year. The only thing you can hope for is that maybe they're not up for the game, right? At least that's the way I feel about it, that maybe they're going to have a down week or something like that. But I don't think it's this week. I think they'll be able to get up for this. And I've got to go with Mount Carmel over Nazareth in this game, Dan.
Joe, that's a real thing, that can you get up for every game? And I can remember, once you're an adult, you're past that a little bit. But even as coaches, I know we would feel it. And you could be on the field. And I talked about this last year. And you could tell your team didn't quite have it, whatever it was pregame. You could see there's not a lot of juice here. What's going on? And it's hard to manufacture it, and sometimes it takes getting hit in the mouth. Sometimes it never comes, for those guys. And so so you just have to be careful for that, because I believe it's a real thing. I think you could, and we would have coaches, meeting in the middle of the field going, what's going on? These guys are flat as could be. And so that is a thing to consider as you do it. But yeah, this is our first of several big games in the burbs. So several Chicago teams coming out west this week. So this will be really interesting. I think it's going to be a tough game, and I've gone back and forth too, Joe. Naz has an offense, I think, that can move against anybody, and that includes Mount Carmel and their fearsome front seven with reigning dog of the week, Roman Igwe. But Naz and Jackson Faela,
Close enough.
has the
Yeah,
weapons,
good.
that you mentioned, along with Eddie McLean in the backfield, that they
Right.
pose problems for anybody. It looked like maybe the passing defense was maybe something that could be attacked in week one. I'm going to take it down to the line though. Again, I can't wait to watch the battle between my favorite name in the conference, Luke Njaychuk, and either Braden Jones or Joey Quinn, and those Naz
Yeah.
and the Naz, and then skill position wise, Naz wide receivers versus Tavares Harrington, from Mount Carmel.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm going strictly on rankings. I'm doing it like literally like a computer would do it. Mount Carmel's 1, Naz is in the top 5 to 7. I'm picking Mount Carmel.
Okay. All right. So we're both picking the same teams for the first couple of games here, and let's move on to the next one. And this is IC versus St. Ignatius. Dan, what are you seeing in this game, or what are you looking at? What do you think some of the storylines are going to be, or what do you think some of the key things are going to be in this?
It's what kind of struck me is how young IC is. I started looking at the roster. You've got junior Nate Lang,
their quarterback.
Sophomores Will Schmidt and Grant Bowen, and as part of their wide receiver core, and they will go up against the strength of the defense in Connor Wanzung and Connor Heights in Elmhurst this week. So my second game, in the burbs, right?
City to the burbs, right?
Yeah.
In the burbs. All right.
And Ignatius has a big front, and they have some studs, namely Omar Sadan. I think IC's defense, looks next level, and will get the edge on St. Ignatius. Ignatius will have to try and control the ball with the exact same game plan that they used last week and probably have every week.
Right.
But IC looks more formidable on both sides of the ball to me, and so my pick is for IC.
Yeah, the only thing I could find, because every year there's some surprise teams, or we're on board with some teams.
Yeah.
To me, one of those teams this year is IC. I really think they've got the right talent in place on both sides of the ball. I like what Nate Lang is doing at quarterback, spreading the ball around a bit, using the different weapons that IC has. The only thing that I can come up with as a potential negative for IC is I feel like they've got a fair amount of guys going both ways. So if they get into a real battle, grind it out type thing, maybe some guys get tired. But I think they've got way too much talent for them to have a letdown here against St. Ignatius. And I like what IC is doing this year. I think I'm sitting at the round table.
Ooh,
how do you like that?
I like it.
Do you?
You are sitting at the round table. Yeah.
Sitting at the round table. And I like IC in this game as well, Dan. So I'm going with IC over Ignatius.
Joe, real quick, you mentioned getting tired. It's going to be hot again this weekend too.
I know.
Yeah, it's going to I saw 90 one of the days. High 80s, I think, Friday. Now I don't think the nighttime it can hold that heat as much anymore, but it's going to be hot at kickoff for sure.
Yeah, it is. And that may make a difference. Are we going to see another cramp game? Some cramp games?
Probably.
Yeah.
They didn't rear their ugly heads week one like they usually do, but you're going to have a game like that at some point. So this could be the week.
Yes, it could be. All right, so let's shift to Wheaton, Dan, where another huge game here. And this is Loyola Academy versus St. Francis. Loyola Academy, another team within the Chicago Catholic League, chasing history this season as far as state championships or consecutive state championships. And they're 1-0, right? They won the first game, and then they had an off week last week. Right. And I think I asked you last week in one of our episodes, do you think that makes a difference? And you said absolutely yes. Do you think that's going to make a difference in this game? As far as Loyola and their preparation or readiness to play St. Francis, who's got 2 wins under their belt?
I do. I think I don't think it's great. I like that you can they probably used last week to get back to the fundamentals. They probably practiced really hard. I bet 2 weeks ago that is now. So, if I think you can manage it as from a coaching staff, but I don't think it's easy. I think it's you try and get into a routine with your players and your team, and I think something like that can disrupt that routine. We talked about it with IC last year, having kind of that same thing. The routine is just
Right.
screwed up, and it can have an impact. And it's impossible to measure other than wins and losses, but coaches can probably see it on the field. But it's a revenge game for Loyola, so I think that helps because St. Francis beat them
Right.
last year in their debut under the lights at Horster Field. This game, another one in the Burbs.
Right.
Yeah, bringing it to the Burbs.
Bringing it to the
The
Western
Western
Burbs.
Burbs.
Yeah.
So they had that unwanted week off, and like I said, we saw what they did, or what that did to some of those teams last year. But I think St. Francis is really talented, and I think
Mm-hmm.
Brock Phillip is a revelation. He has kind of grabbed center stage this week, or the first 2 weeks, and with that wicked receiving core of Washington, Milivojevic, and Glock. Um,
Right.
we'll see if the inexperienced but very well coached Loyola defense, led by Nick Richter, Kai Calcutt, and Gavin King, can avenge last year's loss. Joe,
Mm-hmm.
and I am standing with the 300 and going with the Spartans in this game.
You're going with the Spartans. I am going with the Spartans as well, Dan. But I'm the third wave, so I'm standing with the 900.
The 900, right?
Right. I'm going to cheer on the first two waves, and then hopefully things are close to done by the time they get to my wave.
Yeah, you get help with dinner. Get dinner ready when it comes back.
Yeah, you guys tired? All right. Yeah. Here, let me get you something to eat.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But I like St. Francis too, and I think you know how I like star power, and they've got star
They
power.
sure
Not
do.
saying that Loyola does not, but I think Loyola stars are on the younger side and don't have quite the experience that St. Francis has. And I think they're going to want to avenge their loss from last year, but I don't think they're going to be able to do it at St. Francis. So I'm picking the Spartans as well.
All right. We are in
All
sync.
right. We are in
Have we had
sync.
one different
And
yet?
no,
Dang.
no,
Okay.
not
All
yet.
right.
All right. So let's see. The next game here, Dan, I believe is the Montini Maris game.
So we're on to the orange versus the white.
And that's intra division. You call it whatever you want, but you're going to be at this game, our CCL sidelines.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a really good game, even though I'm a little surprised that Maris struggles so far, although it's not for lack of having talent,
Right.
but they played some really, really good teams,
Yeah.
right? So, but they've had a rough start. You've got to say that, I would think. They hard fought loss to St. Rita, and then really kind of a humbling loss to Brother Rice, 35 to nothing.
Right.
I'm not sure when the last time Marist has lost a game like that. But then across the field, you got Montini. They seem to be clicking so far. We knew their offense was going to click. We knew it might take a little while for their defense, but it seems like their defense is starting to step up now too. And they are right where they left off last year. And the only thing I can come up with for this game, Dan, is that there's such a difference in program size between Marist and Montini. And I've always kind of put that to the side. And just because Montini maybe has 100 less kids in their program across all levels than Marist might have, I don't think their talent level is any less because of that. Montini has proven that they can just attract a lot of talent and really top-notch talent. So I think, again, this is a Montini year with some of the stars that they have. And I think Marist, like we said, has kind of struggled a little bit. But I'm gonna go with Montini in this game, Dan.
All right. Well, we are continuing to be alike because Maris is going to have to prove to me they can move the ball consistently in multiple ways. Kevin Bartolotta has been great, but that's a lot to put on. And Luke DeTemple, their offense is they're inexperienced, even though they've got returning players.
Yeah.
Their returning guys are up front. with Rico Schreiber and New Mexico commit Danzel Newell. This conference just tests you in so many ways that you can't
Yeah.
be one dimensional. And we talked about Montini, and we've said it a million times. We thought they were going to have to rebuild. They're just reloading on defense.
Yeah, for sure.
Future dog, and
Yeah.
it seems like Ladiase is a guy that we need to watch closely, because I read about him every week. You tell me his stats are incredible every week.
They are.
They've got my
Yep.
guy Santino
You got your
Tenuta.
guys.
Yep.
Yep, for sure.
And they are going to they're going to play hard, and in defending Marist, and try, hopefully they have to force, for Montini's sake, hoping they have to force Marist to use a passing game. Marist is going to try and counter, like I said, with Bartolotta. Maybe Luke DeTemple's legs are a factor in this game.
Right.
But Israel Abrams, Isaac Alexander, and company just have too much, and they have a true home field advantage at Montini.
They do.
That
We've been
yeah,
there for home
yep.
games. And
It's
that is an
yeah.
advantage for sure.
So
Yeah.
so I like you, Joe, riding the Bronco.
Okay, riding the Bronco.
Yep.
We are. All right, very good. All right, hold on. Let me see if I've got a sound effect for you, Dan.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
How's that?
I like it.
Is that
There
good?
we go.
All right. All right. It took me a while. I'm sorry. I should have had that up and ready to go, Dan. You surprised me. We are riding the Bronco again this week. So again, let me tell our listeners, you're going to be out there, and we're going to do our CCL sidelines. So make sure you tune in to us on all of our social media on Friday, and we'll be giving you updates on scores. We'll also be giving you Dan's sideline reporting from the Montini Marist game. So make sure you follow us on X, Instagram, Facebook, wherever it might be, and we'll have all that for you.
I'm ready.
You're ready.
Yep.
All right, good. All right, so Joliet Catholic and Fenwick, Dan. So let's start with Joliet Catholic. They're off to a rough start, and we talked about that. They're 0-2. They lost their opener to Lions, who's a really good team. We know that. And then they lost to Glenbard West last week in a closer game. So they've been able to keep the scores close, right? But I feel like in watching Joliet Catholic this year that they're really trying to figure out who they are and what's the best way to utilize the talent that they have on their team. And unfortunately for them, and maybe this is a bit of an identity crisis for them, they've always been able to just pound the ball with these outstanding running backs, right? And they just wear the other teams down. And they mix in a big play here or there with, they've got talented quarterback in Lucas Similik, and they'll mix in a big play here and there. This year, they don't have that, right? They lost their 3 stud running backs from last year. So they're missing that part of their offense. And I feel like last week they might have found a little something, and it's really in the passing game. So it's not their identity, right? But I think it seemed to me like maybe they kind of embraced it and embraced the talent they have, and they had some success doing it last week. Fenwick has been on a roll, right? First 2 games they've won pretty handily. They 40-14 win over DePaul Prep, which we thought was a really nice win for them. Then they won 35-0 over Oak Park River Forest. They've got a ton of talent as well, and they're really on a roll. And Joliet Catholic goes to Fenwick this week to play. And I don't think, even with some of their new wrinkles in their offense, so to speak, I don't think it's going to be enough to counteract where Fenwick is at right now. And I'm going to go with Fenwick in this game.
Well, Joe, okay, here's one where we differ, because I think anyone who's thinking that 0-2 start for JCA signals their demise has got to watch a little closer. They have maybe they've offended the football gods by changing up their offense, and
right.
as they've morphed to kind of a spread look a lot of the time with athletes, that are spread across the field, but they've got guys that can throw, catch, and run. And you mentioned Lucas Similik, Jaden Armstrong and Craig Peacock are really good receivers. And
they are.
Yeah, they can make things happen after they catch the ball. They've also played one of the tougher non-conference schedules in the league this year. So while Fenwick has looked outstanding in their opening victories, I think they're in for a much more physical challenge this week. And I think this one's going to go down to the wire, Joe. I think there's going to be more points than we think scored. And I think JCA is like a cornered animal. And, they have to, their backs are against the wall. So they have got to, they've got to come out fighting, and I think they will. And I think they surprise and come away with the victory.
Okay, I'll make one more point about that, Dan. And I thought about that as well, and I went back and forth on it. And then I thought, what Joliet Catholic's strength is turning out to be on offense is maybe throwing the ball to those talented wide receivers. And then I think, well, who's going to stop that? And I think of who Fenwick has in the defensive backfield and the Thies brothers as far as covering those receivers. Yeah. And I took that into account a little bit.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. Those guys are studs.
But you're right. They are a cornered animal right now. Yeah. And that's scary.
Yep.
To me.
When it's JCA,
when it's JCA, it's scary. Yep. Okay, let's move to the next game, Dan. And this is Providence versus Carmel. And this is at Carmel, I believe. Yeah, up in Mundelein. So how far away are those two schools from each other, Dan?
Funny that you asked, Joe.
Yeah.
Because Providence gets the ride from hell this Friday.
It's so bad. Oh.
Yeah. A couple things about the map.
I would leave on Thursday if I were them.
Spend the night. Find a nice Holiday Inn Express. So you guys are ready? Yeah.
Right down the street.
Yeah. Yep. So, it's a ride from hell. It is 61.9 miles if you go
hellish
355 to the 290. It can be out to 78 miles, depending if you want to try and weave your way through traffic. But
great.
So, and the other thing about on a map, if you look at them on a map, Joe, they are almost directly north and south of one another.
Really?
Yeah. You wouldn't think that in your mind's eye, right? When you think about where Carmel
Mundelein and New Lenox. Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily think that.
Yeah. But they are really right over the top of one another. So interesting little side fact that nobody cares about. But me.
Yeah, maybe they can take a small plane and they can go as the crow flies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just straight, boom, you're there in like 15 minutes.
A helicopter, that'd be cool. Show up like an attack helicopters.
Cool. Yeah. An attack helicopter. Not just a helicopter. It's got to be a Black Hawk helicopter, attack helicopter.
Like three of them.
All right.
But Joe, for Carmel, we give a lot of love to Trey Taylor. Obviously, he's earned it. But like I said in the last couple episodes, they are getting after it on the defensive side of the ball. They've got an edge player, young player, Christian Chaddick, who's a force, and he is tough to contain and looks like a future dog guy too. There's a young group, kind of a core of defenders with Chaddick and Noah Breckenridge, and then they have senior that we mentioned last year a couple times, Nick Hopman back. So they are making a case that Carmel's defense is, and that should get as much press as their offense. Providence is coming off a really tough loss against one of the faster teams I've seen in a while in Lincoln Way Central, who's carving their own niche in that south suburbs. By the way, how good is the football in that area?
Oh, it's unreal. Just think of the Lincoln Way teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. It is.
But Providence quarterback Dominic Vita and wide receiver Xavier Coleman will have to try and control the football, I think, to stay with Carmel at home. Vita can do things with his feet. It's funny. Last year we were talking about that almost every episode, how good some of these quarterbacks were running the ball. But Dominic Vita is kind of one of those guys, and but it's going to be tough to stay with Carmel. Look for Carmel to put up some points and frustrate Providence in this one. My pick is for Carmel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I agree with you, Dan, on this. I think Carmel is clicking this year so far in the first two games. And I think that's going to continue. They're another one of those teams that, last year things just did not go their way, even though they had a bunch of talent. That talent, a lot of it has come back this year.
Yeah.
They're a year older, and they've got a chip on their shoulder, I think.
They are definitely playing like it.
They are. And they posted back-to-back blowouts, 52-13 over Grays Lake, which we kind of expected, Grays Lake Central. But the one we didn't, their 51-7 win at Lake Forest. I didn't see that coming. But they are scoring points, and like you said, their defense has come to play too. So they're good on both sides of the ball.
It's
ferocious.
Yeah.
Yes.
Last year, I remember having like Fenwick, Montini, St. Rita. Now I feel like I see Carmel, maybe St. Lawrence, some ferocity on the defensive side of the ball.
Right. Yeah. So I am with you on this, Dan. I'm going with Carmel over Providence in this game. Okay. All right. So let's see. Where are we at, Dan?
Notre Dame and St. Lawrence.
Notre Dame and St. Lawrence. Yeah. And this is going to be an interesting game. Just because we've got two new coaches, right? Mm-hmm. We've got DeFranza at Notre Dame, and we've got Swanson at St. Lawrence, right? Both coaches have won their first two games. They're both 2-0, right? I would say, as far as from a wins perspective, that I feel like St. Lawrence's wins were maybe a little bit more impressive than Notre Dame's, but I was impressed with what Notre Dame did last week too on offense. Mm-hmm. I thought, boy, did they progress from week 1 to week 2 on offense. And if they keep that progression going, they might be a team to reckon with, throughout their schedule this week, this year. So even though I'm saying all of that, I'm still going to pick St. Lawrence in this, Dan. I like to see the resurgence of Notre Dame a bit, after several down years here, but I still think St. Lawrence has got a little bit too much, and they're going to win out over Notre Dame. So I'm going with St. Lawrence in this.
All right, Joe. Well, I think the key is going to be if Notre Dame's defense can stop Corey Less. He's a battering ram of a running back who makes for a long night for the opponent's front seven. That job's going to come down to Alex Watulowicz and company for Notre Dame. Alex makes tackles. He seems to be all over the field. He's that kind of guy. He's always around the football. There's some sort of talent to that's hard to measure. And St. Lawrence is playing with two quarterbacks, in Noah Taylor and Jimmy McDermott, both with good talent, both capable of running and throwing. And Joe, I'm learning more about St. Lawrence offensive line, which I think is bigger and better than we've reported. I think
than last year.
Yeah, and I think it's bigger than last year too. But their defense looks really swarmy. So I'm
swarmy.
Very swarmy. Yes. So I think the
hashtag, is that a hashtag
swarmy?
Term?
Yes.
All right, good.
But I'm going to be rowing with the Vikings. This
with
week.
The Vikings.
Yes,
I like that.
And
that's good.
Based on a little bit more firepower up front. Close game though. I think it's a close game. So St. Lawrence in a close one.
Okay. All right. We're both the same there as well. So the next game is the Marian Catholic and DePaul Prep.
We're on to the red at the purple.
Red at the purple. And this is kind of the flip side, right? Marian Catholic goes into the city to take on DePaul Prep. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that DePaul Prep?
Chicago Heights to Chicago. Yeah.
All right. So burbs to city.
There you go.
Yeah.
I always consider Marian Catholic kind of the city, but yeah, I get it.
All right.
I'm not saying you're
trying
wrong.
to make a connection there.
I'm not saying you're wrong. You're 100% right, but I get that's the suburbanite coming out in me. That anything east of 294, I'm in the city.
Right. You're in the city, right? Yeah. So interesting. Both teams 0-2. I think you and I would have never expected DePaul Prep to be 0-2 at this point. They've had a tough start, and I think their tough start has come on the you know defensive side of the ball. Where last year they were so good. I mean, they did give up some points, but they giving up 40 and 24 points in two consecutive games, I think, is a lot for
Yeah.
them, and probably a bit of a surprise. Um, but and their offense, I think, is young, even though they've got some good players that came back from last year's team. They've got a new quarterback, got new running backs. They've got a couple new wide receivers as well, and I think they're trying to come into their own here and trying to find their identity this year so far. So I think they're a team, to use one of your terms, Dan, their backs are against the wall a bit in DePaul Prep.
Yeah.
Um, and they need to win this week. And I think they're going to get it against Marian Catholic. Now, Marian Catholic, as we've talked about, they've started out 0-2, but I feel like they've got some talent on the team, especially at the running back position and the quarterback position. But I think DePaul Prep is their week of practice this week had to be really tough.
I'm sure.
I think, and I think it being at DePaul Prep and them kind of chomping on the bit to get in the to get a win, I think it's going to be too much for Marian Catholic traveling there. So I'm going to pick DePaul Prep in this game.
All right. Well, Joe, like you, I'm surprised both of these teams are 0-2. I think I may have underrated Marian Catholic's non-conference opponent. That they played Morton. Which is a total weakness of mine. If you don't play in this area, you must not be as good. So which
Right.
is always wrong and dangerous. Both teams have not performed to me on offense as well as I thought they would. Marian Catholic has guys back as well. And they had really good players. They returned like a two-way Division Player of the Year in Gavin Neal, I think.
Yeah.
And along with Owen Askren and Kyle Scott. Is that the running back? That's
running back. Yeah.
And now, not all those guys are on offense all the time, but I thought we would see more explosive plays. It's still early. They still have a division title, goal in front of them. DePaul Prep has way more new faces and ones we're getting familiar with, and Jackson Grabinski, Tyson Hooks. So I'm expecting to hear more from Matt Osterman as conference play gets underway, but you said it. Both of these teams are BATW, and I think we will see them play like it this weekend. But my pick is also for DePaul Prep.
Okay. All right. So we're moving on to St. Pat's versus Leo. Interesting game here, Dan.
Yep.
St. Pat's 1-1. They had a really nice win last week, 49-12. Whereas Leo, another nice win for them, and they're 2-0 for the first time in 11 years, I think, is what I saw. And you know what the strength of Leo's team is from, some of the things I saw, some of the things I've read, is their defense.
Yeah.
And their defense has only given up, I think 12 points, 14 points. I forget what I read, but they have not given up many points over their first two games. Had a nice win last week. And I think their confidence is through the roof right now, just based on what they're doing. The only problem for Leo is that their numbers are so down. They've got, I think, just about every one of their players going both ways. Their offense has not been very good, but their defense has been very good. But I don't think they've got enough to hang with St. Pat's here. Although I love the resurgence of Leo, especially over the first two games. But I think St. Pat's is going to have just a little bit too much for Leo. I think Leo kind of runs into a physical battle that maybe they can't win at this point in their growth as a program. So I'm going with St. Pat's in this game.
Yeah, Joe, I'm watching a little bit more of St. Pat's as more film and video gets out there, and I'm excited to see Gavin Gardner at quarterback. I think I told you
Mm-hmm.
watching him and then doing kind of a little bit of a deeper dive. He looks like he's grown a foot. He's listed at 6'4", and you watch film from lower levels, and he's looks like one of those guys. He's a junior, so that's kind of when that happens. I feel like I've seen that explosive growth, and he's got a nice arm, big tall QB. Um, he's received a lot of interest from MAC schools since last season, and so he could be more and more prolific as the year goes on. Like
Yeah.
Leo, it looks like most of the improvement is on the defensive side. Early on, and I think that always shows itself first. And it's a sign of good coaching. You want to get guys to play good defense first, and that's running to the ball and effort, which is what you want to see, and kind of the first thing before anything else.
Right.
You liked some of the young guys on Leo, and especially what you
I
saw on
do.
defense. And
Yeah.
this week St. Pat's, the big old line, with the improving offense, is just going to be too much for Leo.
Okay. All right. So there we are on that. And our last game, Dan, is Bennett, and they host De La Salle this week out at Benedictine University. And
Coming to the Burbs,
coming to the burbs, city to the burbs.
bringing it to the Burbs.
Yes. All right. So what do you think here, Dan? We've seen Bennett. I mean, and we've seen some of the De La Salle. Bennett's 1-1. Had a good win their first week. Last week they did not look as good. Coming up against a little bit more of a talented team, I guess you would say, in Glenbard North. But what are your thoughts about this game?
De La Salle's getting to that point in their schedule that represents kind of how many games they made it to last year. So I'm hoping they can
Mm-hmm.
continue to progress, and they have some pieces. They have skill guys like running back Zach Woodbury, slot position guy Josh Thornton. They play hard. They have a promising sophomore Amari Brown at quarterback. So, they're going to be a handful in another couple of years. So these teams probably better get them while they're down. For Bennett, they got a spark last week in the running game from Joe Salvino, and
Right.
and I thought that was good. That was something that they need. They just couldn't sustain anything offensively and defensively. My concern about them, I think I mentioned it last week, defending against a big physical team with a big physical hard running back, kind of came true, and they looked great at the start. It just wasn't sustained throughout the entire game,
Yeah.
and Glenbard North was able to pull away. But it's a good opportunity for Bennett, I think, to get the offense in rhythm, and try and get some more big plays out of the passing game. We haven't mentioned Luke Doyle a lot this year, and I
Right.
think that's something you could see if you watch their film. They're trying to get him the ball. They just haven't had a ton of success doing that. Just a little off. And in the
Yeah.
passing game, where it was such a big part of it last year, because they had experience. So I think Bennett has an opportunity, to do that this week, and I'm going to go with Bennett.
Yeah, I think if Bennett, what they've shown me over the first two games is, when they execute and execute well on both sides of the ball, whether it's offense or defense, they can hang with any team, I think, and then they can rely on some of their more talented or star players like Luke Doyle, who I don't think has gotten the ball nearly enough
Yeah.
this year. So I think they've got to execute on both sides. They've got to execute their plays. They've got to get their stars and their playmakers the ball, especially on offense. And their defense needs to step up and just play tough, I think. Because I've seen a couple of letdowns in some of the first two games. So I feel like they've made some growth or they've had some growth over the first two games, and I'm hoping this is a game where they kind of put it all together. And obviously De La Salle is, like you said, They're young. They've got some talent there. They're still probably not quite at the level where they're gonna compete week in and week out with some of the teams in the Chicago Catholic League.
Yeah,
I just
up front they
don't see that
struggle on
happen.
both sides of the ball.
Up front,
Yeah,
they don't have the size, quite that some of the other teams have, but they got some talent in those key positions. But I think not enough for them for this week against Bennett. It's out at Benedictine, like we said. So I'm going to pick Bennett as well in this game, Dan. So we really only have one difference?
Yeah. Yep.
That was
Joliet
Catholic Fenwick game.
And it's Joe. We're going to be wrong. I mean, we're not going to.
We are going to be wrong.
12-0 and 11-1, right? So there's going to be some upsets. So I'll be shocked or I shouldn't say upsets. There's going to be picks that we don't get right. So
that we didn't get right. Yeah. Yes.
Guaranteed.
And that's what's fun about it,
yes,
isn't it?
It is. It is.
And that's why they play the games, and that's why we love to watch and cover them. Yeah, too. So, don't give us a hard time if we picked them wrong, because we just enjoy the games.
Yeah, we don't want to hear from you unless you're telling us intra and inter.
Right. That's it. Yes. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of our Prognosticus episode. We've covered some big matchups across the Chicago Catholic League, games that will test some of the depth, discipline, heart, rivalries renewed, some championship contenders going against each other, underdogs maybe looking for that first win or season-changing spark. And as always, we appreciate you tuning into the Varsity Voices. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And be sure to share the podcast with your fellow Chicago Catholic League football fans and follow along on social media for score updates and highlights all weekend long. We'll be back next week with more previews, predictions, and storylines as the season rolls on. Until then, enjoy the games this week. Support your schools, and remember, in the Chicago Catholic League, every Friday night is a battle.